Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve and Maz. In the podcast, I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical taste, their memories, their experiences, and they get to collect their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on episode number 134. Before we start this one, I want to tell you about the crazy week I have just had. I'm going to get personal with you. I had a massive week planned last week. I planned to see Kiss on Wednesday night at the O2, Springsteen on Thursday, and then that was going to be followed by Iron Maiden and a 3-night run of epic gigs. However, illness struck in the Nussbaum household. Kiss was cancelled. Bruce went ahead. I must say, Bruce was absolutely glorious and one of my most favourite gigs, if not my favourite gig of all time. But I got home from Bruce to find the shock horror of my wife, Sarah P., who was my guest on episode 99, being ill. And that meant Iron Maiden couldn't go ahead and was cancelled. So 1 out of the 3 gigs, but what a gig it was. What a week it was in the Nussbaum household. And before we start with this one, I just want to say a massive thank you to Helen Robinson, who was my guest on the last episode of the podcast. We had a massive response to this one. Lots of listens, lots of love for Helen, lots of social posts about her episode, about her love of music, which really shone through in the episode. So thank you to Helen for coming on to that one. If you've not listened to episode 133, please go back and do so. But this is all about 134, and this Fantastival podcast has reconnected with me with so many old friends and chums and H&V colleagues, which I'm so grateful for. And this episode is going to feature another one. And I reckon it was about 15 years, a 15-year hiatus of not seeing each other, which is far too long, but I am absolutely delighted and thrilled, elated, motivated to be joined by an H&V legend. He's got a beautiful voice. We're going to hear all about it. He's an absolute top man. It's the one and only Maz Ataie.
Well, I was going to say good evening. I was going to say good afternoon, but good evening. What a build-up, Steve. I think it's downhill from there.
There's only one way we're going, and that is straight uphill. I'm so happy to finally be talking to you. Like, I know we've planned this for a while. It's been, like I said, 15 years. I'm absolutely chuffed to have you on the podcast. I remember we'd always talk music. We'd always talk football. I think we're going to have to chill on the football a little bit in this one and probably make it more music orientated, which is not a problem at all. But as always, Maz, I always like to talk to my guests about their mental health, find out how they've been. So to start off with, mate, how are you?
Do you know what? I'm good, actually, Steve. Yeah, can't complain. Back into my music as well, so that helps. Enjoying work, healthy, and yeah, all good.
That's great to hear.
Thanks for asking.
That's great to hear. I love asking and finding out how people have been. So Before we crack on with finding about all your musical tastes and your experiences, I always like to try and get a bit more info about my guests for anyone who might not be familiar with them. So I obviously know you as an ex-HMV manager. I know you went on to work for Brentford Football Club. I know you as a top guy who likes to sing as well. But for anyone listening who might not know you, Maz, tell us a bit more about who is the myth, the man, the legend behind Maz.
Well, I think I can tell you who's the man. I'm not sure about the myth and the legend. But thank you. So I've always, obviously, so I was born in Tehran in Iran. So and my dad is still a songwriter there. So I just spent all my time from the age of like 2 or 3 being in recording studios to about God knows when, getting reel-to-reels out and just saying, what's this? I've always been surrounded by music. And I think coming from Iran as well, came over to the UK when I was 7 with Persian music. It was always about melody, sense of melody. So that's something which we'll talk about later is what sort of influenced my music. And then, so when I left college, went to college and I thought, got into, I really wanted to, get a band and start singing. So I think it hit just before the Britpop era, really. So I think it was about 93, 94, got a band together. And then, did all the gigs, did all the, I think we were on the circuit with, at the time, Muse and Coldplay.
Wow.
I don't know what happened to them, but they're jealous of me now. And so music, and I still do music now. It's just my passion. I'd say, Steve, apart from, I know it's cheesy, apart from my son, music's the only thing, whether I'm doing it or listening to it, that I feel like, $1 million. I feel no matter what type of day or time I'm having, that's it. Music just makes me, feel great. Can't do without it. I can't understand anyone that doesn't like music or just sees music as something like elevator music. So there you go.
And you mentioned kind of about being in a band when you were younger. That was, to my understanding, that's you singing, right? So you were using...
Yeah. So, and what I did, I wrote the lyrics and the melodies as well. So we were called Stone Blue, and we got together in '94. So we did all the usual, like the Barfly, Dublin Castle, Dingwalls, Camden Circuit, and yeah, it's really hard to sort of find out what type of music it was, but I'd suppose anything, it's like a mixture of like the Manics, bit of Skunk Anansie, but a lot based on melody. So like the Beatles songbook of, big choruses, big middle eights, epic is I'd probably best describe it. And and I still see, two of the boys are still, my best mates, and we're working with music now as well. So yeah, no, do you know what? It's the best time of my life. Absolutely best time of my life. When people say, you got to get signed or go on, it's a moment in your life when you look back and you think, oh, we had some fun. And some of it which I can't tell you on this podcast, obviously.
Obviously, but you're still singing, right? So I've seen like clips of you going into studio, so you're still very much involved. So is that you going in from a solo aspect, or you say you still speak to a couple of the boys who are in the band? Are they helping you out? Who are you doing playing with at the moment? Yeah,
well, first and foremost, we're doing it for fun because, being nearly 52, it'd be quite sad if I still held out a torch to, get a record deal or anything like that. So it really is for fun. For this my passion. So it's with two of the boys. So no, we're called Electroverb. So it's not a solo thing. It's the three of us together. So we wrote all the tunes together. And since December, we've been in the studio writing and recording. Then we've done six tracks at the moment. And yeah, they're done, and we're going to get them mastered and just like learn how to put it out there again. Because obviously it's all a young people's thing with regards to like TikToks and Spotify and how all that market and all that works. But yeah, just for fun, really, Steve, just to get it out there and see what people think.
I can't wait to hear it. I can't wait to hear that and help push the sound out there. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. And you mentioned earlier you had a son, and your son's kind of carried over the passion for music in the family, right? So as I understand it, your son's out there not singing, but playing the tunes.
Yeah, let's get it right. Singing takes much more talent.
Of course.
No, I'm joking. No, so do you know what? I never pushed it on him, Steve, actually. That's one thing I've never done, not kind of a parent anyway, but I think just him being surrounded by music. So he got into DJing. He asked for some decks 2 Christmases ago, and me and his mum thought, it'd just be something, you want to do. And now he's had like 3 million streams. He's had Paula Abdul use his music. He's had Man United, Real Madrid, Liverpool. He uses music on TikTok. He's got played some gigs, good gigs. So yeah, he loves it. He's really passionate about it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, to be fair, as long as he enjoys it, that's all that matters to me.
Fantastic. Sounds like he could be going places. Maybe we'll have a father-son world tour in a not too distant future, or at least a UK tour.
I think he'd run a mile. I asked him if he would play one of our tracks if we did like a house remix, and he'd play it. And yeah, no surprises for guessing what the answer was. Never mind.
Outrageous behaviour. So, Maz, you mentioned kind of your early musical kind of influences growing up in a house where music was very prevalent. You mentioned melody a lot, but in terms of like musical like genres, kind of what music are you into? Is there a particular genre for you, or are there more? What are you into?
You know what? I'm right across the board. I mean, when I came over to the UK from Iran when I was 7, I think the bands that I was really like caught my imagination was The Jam, Blondie, Squeeze, and you could argue some of them weren't like heavy on melody, but it was just like, wow, what is this? Really got into that. But yeah, just all sorts of things. For me, it's all about the song. Is it a good song? I don't care if you're unusual, if it's innovative, if it's like something that isn't new, people have done. It's all about, is it a good song? And for me, I suppose a lot of it is based around melody. But yeah, I'm into all right across the board, really.
That's good to hear. Is there anything at the moment, Maz, that you're listening to? So I found myself back in a world of Springsteen, and I'm well back into that. I'm currently listening to a guy called Josh Doyle, who used to be in the Dum Dums. That came on my iPad, and he made like a country album 10 years ago. So I'm well back in that world. Anything at the moment that you're listening to?
Yeah, I mean, something like new artists. I really like Young Fathers, quite heavy, great at Glastonbury actually. Joy Crooks as well, she's good. DMAs, they're not that new, but I love the DMAs. Working Men's Club. So these are sort of the new music. So I listen to a lot of Radio 6. So I think after a while, for me anyway, it was like, you know what, I need to discover new music, because I was just going back to everything that I knew. I was just getting a bit stale, a bit bored, and especially going back into the studio, just looking for influences as well. Tame Impala as well, although not brand new, you know. So those sort of acts, and I think the early sort of late noughties, bands like LaRue, Lady Hawk, that sort of 80s electric feel as well. So I was listening to that, been listening to that a lot as well. But obviously, yeah, you've got the old classics as well. Like, I'm really an 80s child, so the 80s music I absolutely, you know, love. Whether some of your listeners might think, oh, that's a bit, you know, mainstream, but, you know, I grew up with like Duran Duran and Spandau Ballet, but also like, you know, Depeche Mode, early Simple Minds, early U2, The Cure. And then obviously then it got to that sort of acid house, or whether it be like you had one foot in rock with Stone Roses, one foot on the dance floor, and then all that sort of soul to soul, CNC Music Factory, got into that as well. So like you can see, like rock right across the board. But I'm still sort of searching for new music, and Radio 6 is where I go to for that.
Yeah, you mentioned some great acts there. I saw Joy Crooks. She supported Lizzo when we saw Lizzo earlier in the year. She was fantastic live.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, another back Chromeo as well, I forgot.
Yeah.
Chromeo, that sort of feel. But Lizzo's, yeah, I don't mind Lizzo. Again, I think it's my age, Steve. I'll hear a song, I'll be like, I love that song, but I have no idea who they are. And then I have to go on, I'd Shazam it. I'm on Shazam quite a lot, mate. So, yeah.
I was going to say, there's an app for that in case you were unawares.
What, yeah, Shazam, right?
Yeah, Shazam, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I'm on it all the time, mate. Don't worry.
Absolutely. So, Maz, let me take you back to when you was a younger man, almost, it can't be that many years ago. You said you were 52, which I find unbelievable, because you don't look it whatsoever.
Thanks, mate. You're a star. Thank you.
Bit of pocket money floating around. Time to buy your first single or record. Remember what you bought and that experience? Yeah,
it was Squeeze and East Side Story album. Love Squeeze. Chris Difford, Glenn Tilbrook, great songwriter. Well, Difford was the lyric writer, great wordsmith. And you know what, Glenn Tilbrook, it's funny with singers. In America, it's all about singing. But in the UK, no one really goes on about voice. But I think Glenn Tilbrook's got, you know, great vocals, so great voice. So yeah, Squeeze was the first album. I think it was 83. I was about 11 or 12, so it was the first album I got.
Great answer. Obviously, you worked at HMV. What are your lasting memories working, I guess, in a music shop, right, when in a pre-streaming world? So for me, I remember that excitement of like the Strokes' first album coming out, for example, and the shop being rammed, or the Arctic Monkeys, which I think, to me, that debut album was the last album, which was like a flyer. Maybe Adele's second album, I remember very vividly being one where you just could not keep that album in stock for love or money. But I guess you worked in a record shop, right, in the golden age of the CD, for all intents and purposes. I guess, what were your memories kind of about that time?
You know what, actually, Steve, I'll go before HMV. So I used to work at a place called MVC, Music and Video Club, where you'd have to bring the card in.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
So I was there for about 7 years. So I was there in 1997, August 20th, Be Here Now, Oasis. And I think it was the last time that it was open at midnight, sort of, for an album. So where the queue going round. Oh, yeah, that era. So we had Portishead album, Dummy, Oasis, Be Here Now. There was loads, the Ocean Colour Scene, Mosley Shawls. So that era really sort of defines for me working in a record store. And then obviously going on to funny enough, HMV, I did a record with a band called Atomic Hooligan, who were initially a breakbeat band, but then they did an album. So I did that as well. So I always used to play that at lunchtimes as well. So I remember that as well, but never mind, to one side, that one. But I think when I was at HMV, as it was going, you were sort of coming out the Britpop era as well. But I remember being, a lot into sort of like the Portishead at the time. And then even the acid jazz scene as well. So I used to love, sort of early Jamiroquai, Mother Earth, Young Disciples, Incognito, Boydroy, who are playing again soon. So I'm going to see them as well. So again, that when I hear music like that, I just takes it back to when we were at work, really. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, amazing times, great times. Did you ever get to serve anyone, whether it was at MVC or HMV? Did you ever get to meet anyone who you was into at the time? So I love asking ex-HMV people or HMV people this, because everyone normally has like a story to tell. And I saw a little smile appear on your face when I asked you that question. So do you have any experiences like that?
Yeah, Steve, I had a random one. So we opened the HMV in Hemel Hempstead, right, of all places. No offence to anyone who lives in Hemel Hempstead. It's a lovely place. But, you know, you're thinking, right, who do we get to open that store? We had Texas, right? Texas came down to Hemel Hempstead to open a store. And you know what, Charlene, I think I fell in love with Charlene. Just chatting away to her and a guitarist, I think it's called, a guy called Ali. Just one thing, it was just like, tell me stories, like, you know, what was going on, you know, what are the bands, what's this, what they like, what's this like. And she just done a duet with Rammstein as well. So she was just telling me all about that. I was like, what is going on here? So yeah, no, that was the one where to this day I still don't know how Texas opened the Hemel Hempstead store, HMV. But she was lovely. I saw her in Glastonbury actually, just gone there. Still got it. But yeah, but other than that, I think I worked at Hampstead as well, and Atomic Kitten had opened that one as well, which was, yeah, that was fun. And then Watford store, I think we had an X Factor. Weren't even a winner, Steve. I can't remember her name, to be honest. Let's leave it at that. It wasn't Darius or Chico, put it that way.
It's amazing you mentioned Texas, because as we speak, Texas are doing a gig with HMV right now.
What?
In the Coventry
You're
Empire.
joking.
No, it's funny you mentioned Texas. So still going all these years later. And obviously, like you said, played Glasgow. Probably had like the best slot at Glasgow right before the mystery band, who everyone knew was basically the Foo Fighters, right? So they had like a massive crowd watching them. And
well, she's got a really good voice, hasn't she? So I've always thought she's got a great voice. In fact, I really liked him with the first album in 1990. Was it I Don't Want to Love Her, that single. It was a bit more gritty. And I know the album that broke them, you know, it sold millions. But I thought that one was okay. But at the earlier stuff, yeah, I really liked. I don't mind Texas. But yeah, there you go. That's my right. I mean, Hemel Hempstead again. Sorry. There you go.
So Maz, this is all about you getting to collect your fantasy festival. Have you been to many festivals? Are you a fan of the festival?
Yeah. I'm not a fan of festivals now because I know I'm staying in a tent. At my age, you know, if they can like chaperone me to a hotel, that'd be great. But yeah, I do. So the first festival I went to, it's quite late on actually, it was V96, the very first V96. Oh, it's great, Steve. It was amazing. It was just, again, it was the height of like the Britpop era, the 90s. And, you know, so I used to love Cooler Shaker, the Cardigans. But I'll tell you what it was, we waited for Weller as he was headlining, and Charlatans were on before Weller. And I remember thinking, yeah, I quite like Charlatans, you know, not bad. They were amazing live. They were better than Weller. And that's happened twice with Charlatans for me, because then I would also feel Oasis at a festival, and Charlatans were on before Oasis, and they were then Oasis. But yeah, I love that. I just love that, you know, just going for a different stage. And it's not just about the music either, you know, just the whole, you know, going with friends, drinking, eating, just, you know, having a good time, really. But I'll be honest with you, as I've gotten older, there's less and less that I go to. There's some that I'd love to go to. But yeah, the V96 still sticks out for me.
Classic.
Yeah, just trying to think of else. Yeah, but Cardigans were great as well. I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah, I remember the Cardigans. The Cardigans randomly keep coming up in conversation. We watched, I recently watched 10 Things I Hate About You, and it turns out there was a Cardigans song on the sound. I mean, that's such a 90s soundtrack in like the best possible way, but Cardigans are on there, which we just watched recently. And I feel like the Cardigans are always on like XFM. If you listen to XFM at a certain time of day, you'll hear like my favourite Mistake, if that's the track that I'm thinking of. But yeah, good band. I remember seeing them at a V. I think that was like V98 or 99. We might have even been at the same V over time. Sure, we probably were at some point.
Yeah, and Nebworth's lineup was amazing as well. I mean, that looking back on it now, Steve, you just think they had like the Manics, Prodigy, you know, Oasis, and just trying to think, Tom Waits, there's a few more as well. And now looking back, you're just thinking, oh, you know, you had all the best band on one lineup. Yeah. Just amazing times there.
I mean, I was lucky enough to go to that on the Saturday, and that was like a Fantastival in itself, right? So that was like Oasis, Prodigy, Manics, Ocean Colour Scene.
That's it.
And the Chemical Brothers. That's like a 5-band lineup who could easily be someone's Fantastival. Or, in my opinion anyway, at the height of their careers. So Oasis after What's the Story, Prodigy, Fat of the Land, Manics, Everything Must Go, Ocean Colour Scene, Moseley Shoal had literally just come out, and Chemical Brothers hadn't quite reached where they were going to, but were obviously on that trajectory. So, yeah, amazing gig to be at. So, talking of amazing gigs, Maz, do you have a favourite gig that you can mention without spoiling your Fantasy Festival lineup?
Yeah, so my favourite gig was actually a private gig. So we were involved, my friend worked for this clothing brand, and we got invited from Dusk Till Dawn, the movies, party in Ministry of Sound. And this was 95, I think, or 96. And Prodigy were doing a private gig at Ministry of Sound. I was like, oh, this is... And I was right up close. It was amazing, mate. Robbie Williams stood next to me, but this was Robbie Williams, Left Take That, hadn't become a solo artist in his 90s shell tracksuit, not looking great, but, you know, he did all right in the end. And it was just it was just amazing, Steve. They're the best gigs for me, the sort of intimate, if you can get a big, you know, great live artist in an intimate setting, you know, instead of the big sort of festivals where sound sometimes, you know, is a bit of an issue and stuff. Oh, it's amazing, mate, yeah. Definitely that one.
Sounds like...
Yeah, Stevie Wonder came a close second, but I'll come on to Stevie later.
All right, Stevie Wonder might be making a Fantastival appearance. So, like I said at the top of the episode, the Fantastival Podcast is about getting our guests to collate their fantasy festival. So Maz is a very lucky man. He gets to choose any 5 acts, one of whom must play one of their studio albums in full. And Maz also gets to choose an encore, which can be any song that all 5 of his acts can perform together to end his fantasy festival. So it's very simple. 5 acts take 5 time slots. So in the last episode of the podcast, I had Helen Robertson on, and she created her Wings and Waves on the Water Fantasy Festival. In her opening act, she actually went for an artist who had never been chosen before, Bollywood star by the name of Shankar Madhavan, which was a great choice. In her super second act, she picked Elvis Costello and had him play his album Armed Forces in full. For her Midway Madness slot, she went for the band Idols, who made their Fantasy Festival debut. And for her pre-headline act, she went for the band we all knew she would pick, the widely predicted Reverend and the Makers. And for her headline act, she picked Bob Marley and the Wailers. And for her encore, she had all 5 of her acts perform Get Up, Stand Up. So for any first-time listeners, it is that easy. You get to pick any 5 acts in any order to collate your Fantasy Festival. So Maz, I'm really looking forward to seeing who makes your Fantasy Festival. But before we go through the acts who are going to make it and who aren't going to make it, first of all, we need to give your Fantasy Festival a name and give it a venue. So Maz, what are you going to call your Fantasy Festival?
Right, I had problems with this, Steve. And right up until about an hour ago, couldn't come up. And this was someone who writes song titles, but obviously festivals are a bit limited. And believe it or not, I asked 3 people, and without the 3 knowing what the other one said, they all said the same thing. So I thought, I've got to go with that. So I'm not going to be performing at the festival, my band. So I thought, well, the only self-indulgent thing is to call it Mazfest.
Okay. Do you know what I thought you were going to call it for a sec? I thought you were going to go Maz Ataie.
Oh, you see, I should have called you. Maz Ataie Fest. But yeah, I asked 3 people and they went, Mazfest. I was like, really?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but 3, so we'll go with that.
All right, so Mazfest has been confirmed. You can hold it anywhere in the world. I know you're a massive Liverpool fan. We've never taken a fantasy festival to Anfield, so maybe we'll go there this evening. You can take us back to Ministry of Sound. You can take us to HMV Watford. You can take us to Hemel Hempstead if you want to. I'm sure you're not going to, but we could go there. Or you could take us across the pond. Anywhere you go, Maz, we're going to follow you for Mazfest. So where are we going to hold your fantasy festival?
Do you know what? I thought you'd been reading my notes there, Steve. We're going to hold it at Stanley Park, right next to Anfield.
Fair.
And you know what? I'm surprised that no one's ever had a festival there. I even took a picture for you as well that I'm going to send over. I've done it all. I've planned it all. Which end the stage is going to be. Obviously not the end that you can see Goodison Park. So yeah, Stanley Park, Mazfest, Stanley Park, Liverpool, home of music. There you go.
All right, so we're doing it. Mazfest, Stanley Park. Everyone's waiting with bated breath. So before we talk about your 5 acts, I know you're a massive music fan. You've mentioned loads of great acts already. So I imagine the process of getting from lots and lots of bands down to 5 has been quite a difficult one for you. But any acts who you want to mention, who you love, but just aren't making it into your fantasy festival lineup?
Yeah, the 2 straight away was Queen and the Eagles. I mean, for me, again, for festivals, I think you really need to play, because you've got a mixture of fans, so you haven't got your own fans. It's big, massive, like there's 100,000 people there. I personally think you need to play songs that people are familiar with. And Queen and Eagles, they're just like, yeah, one after another. So them, and I thought for a third one, a bit funny, David Brent doing his album as well. I'd love that.
Not making it in though.
So that would be good.
That would have been great.
No, he's not making it. He just missed out. I think Gervais would be all right though. So yeah, those three just missed out. I was still toying with the Eagles about an hour ago, but no. Yeah, they just missed out.
Okay, after 134 episodes, the Eagles have only ever been picked for one fantasy festival. I would have thought they'd have been picked a lot more. I love the Eagles, lots of time for them. They miss out on your fantasy festival. Queen, a bit more successful in the Fantastival lineups. They've been picked 7 times, but they'll have to wait a while longer to play in a fantasy festival. So 2 o'clock in Stanley Park, Maz Fest. It's a lovely day, lots of lovely food, lots of nice weather, lots of nice drinks going around. It's time for your open act to hit the stage of Stanley Park. So Maz, who's going to open your fantasy festival?
Right, Steve, before we go any further, I can guarantee you all my 5 have probably been picked for the first time, because I've gone for, because a lot of your people you've had on the podcast have gone for really, cool, credible acts, some that I've, not heard of. Me, I'm going straight down the middle. I don't believe in the word guilty pleasure. It's just pleasure. And these are like ideally my 5 favourite artists. Hit after hit. That's what it's all about. So, on at 2 o'clock, did you say, Steve?
Yeah, absolutely. You must have heard this podcast before, because I always make a point of saying you can't fool the Fantastival. Like, you just can't get round it, right? So you've got to be honest with yourself. Yeah. So, yeah, there's no such thing as a guilty pleasure, because, like you said, it's just a pleasure.
Exactly. Thank you. I'll pay you later, Steve. Right, so Hall & Oates, the mighty Hall & Oates are going on first.
Absolutely.
In fact, Daryl Hall he played last night, actually, and then he supported Billy Joel on Friday, I believe, as well.
Do you know what? I got offered very kindly from one of our ex-guests, Steve Foster, I think he was like my guest in 17 or 18, offered me a ticket to see Daryl Hall, but my other podcast made its vibrant return, and I still felt a bit iffy after my little incident. Otherwise, I would have loved to have seen that gig, because Daryl Hall and his band are amazing. But however, I was unable to go. So Hall & Oates then, maybe unsurprisingly, you're right, first time they've ever been picked for a fantasy festival, Maz. So you're breaking your duck with a new act to the fantasy festival. But why are you picking Hall & Oates in?
Why?
Yeah.
Right, so I mean, I grew up, Steve, I think around the early 80s, I just heard, I Can't Go For That. And I still think, the production on that tune, the drum sound, the sound on the effects on his vocals, it's just timeless. And the amount of time that's been sampled as well, I think De La Soul obviously sampled it as well. It's just timeless. So I heard that and I was blown away. But again, with them, melody. It is that they're so, their songs are so heavily influenced by melody. And they've almost been like 3 different bands, because in the 70s, they were almost like a folky rock band. Like She's Gone, Rich Girl, One on One, and then hit the 80s, and then it hits, Private Eyes, Man Eater, Kiss on My List. It's just great melodies, and his voice is amazing. I think he's arguably second to who I'm going to mention next, best vocalist I've heard. So yeah, love him. And I saw him recently at Wembley Arena, so that was like a bucket list for me. So yeah, definitely them on first. They're more famous in America. That's why they're going on first, you see.
Good shout, great shout. First time they've been picked. I've actually seen Hall & Oates. I saw them about 10 years ago. I think I took Sarah to see them in Hammersmith when they first came over.
Oh, okay.
They were amazing. Any gig that starts with, I think they opened with Man Eater and went straight into Kiss on My List, and then went into like another massive one. And you're like, these opening 3 songs are like unreal.
Do you know what, Steve? Just for anyone listening, if they go on YouTube and listen to Live at Daryl's House, which is a series he's done for about 10 or so years, and he has different artists coming on, and they do the artist songs and some Hall & Oates songs. It's amazing. Definitely recommend that.
Yeah, great show. I've seen a few of those. John Baker, again, big friend of the podcast, John Baker, got me into Daryl's House. Used to play the Billy Gibbons one all the time when they play like this easy. And that house is absolutely rocking, because it's literally like, it's in his garage, right? Like, it's part of his house. Like, unbelievable. So great choice, Maz. We got Hall & Oates opening your fantasy festival. They play for an hour, and at 3 o'clock, we'll take a half-hour break. That'll take us to 3:30, and it'll be time for your Super Seconds act. So, Maz, who's going to be your Super Seconds act?
Again, there's going to be no let-up, Steve. All up-tempo, all hits. Jamiroquai.
Great shout. Great shout. So, Jamiroquai has been chosen on the podcast. He's been chosen once before by Ross Embleton, who was the Orient manager used to be the manager when he was on the podcast. So second time they've been chosen. Again, Super Second slot must be something for Jamiroquai because the second time they've been picked as the Super Seconds act. So Maz, why Jamiroquai, buddy?
You know what? The first album, Emergency on Planet Earth, it was a time we were going on, I think went to Tenerife. The album had come out in the summer, in the sunshine, and the tune. First of all, his vocals as well. I know people say it's quite similar to Stevie Wonder, but I think he's got a unique voice. I love a show person on stage, a front person, a good front person. He's definitely that. Great dancer, original attire as well, with the hat, the look, the tunes off the Emergency on Planet Earth. Like, if I like it, if I do it, when you're going to learn, Too Young to Die. Yeah, just captured my imagination really. And then from then on, obviously, like earlier stuff, it was a bit more sort of rooted in acid jazz, a bit more funk. And as they've gone on, they've almost become, dare I say, a little bit more middle of the road, a bit more, sort of. There was a period they sounded like Daft Punk as well, I think, in the mid-noughties, influenced by them. But yeah, just love their sound, love the songs, love his vocals. Yeah, definitely.
Great shout. So Jamiroquai,
uplifting.
Yeah, as always, like you'll always like nod your head or have a little smile when the Jamiroquai track comes on. I think the album's like 30 years old. I'm sure last year they were celebrating like the 30th anniversary of it, which sounds mad to me. Anyway. Yeah,
it came out, I think, June 93. Yeah, that's crazy.
30 years old.
I was only 10 then.
30 years old, but still fresh as ever. Jamiroquai are your Super Seconds act. They're going to play from 3:30 to 4:30. The place is going to be absolutely dancing and bouncing along to the smooth sounds of JK and his band. We'll take another half-hour break. That takes us to 5 o'clock. At this point, we're going to go to the Midway Madness act. Maz has a big smile on his face. So do I. I've got no idea what's coming. So, Maz, who are you going to have as your Midway Madness act?
Well, when you said madness, I mean, I don't know if the time slot in reality would work for these guys, and I don't know what's come on before them and after them will work either. But I've got to have them in, and that's The Prodigy. Obviously, going back to what I said about my favourite gig, but they're the only like band or whatever you want to call it that when I used to be in a club, wherever it was, as soon as it would come on, even if I wasn't moving for the rest of the night, I would be on. Can you call it a dance floor? Is there such a thing as dance floor? I'd be dancing, put it that way. Anything. As soon as the beats. I don't know any act with their beats. It's just, and the phrasing as well from, God bless him, Keith and Maxim, how it would be like alternate against the beats with their phrasing was just, it's amazing. I used to incorporate a bit of Poison into our set list and when we used to play as well. Don't know why I'm sort of admitting to that now, but there you go. Yeah, just love them, Steve. Absolutely love them. In fact, I told my son, because he's going to Boomtown Festival next month, and Prodigy are playing. And I said to him, watch them, be interesting to see what you think. But obviously, that I'm looking at, with certain acts, in watching them in their, like, at the height of their power, so to be. So I don't know what they'd be like now, but yeah, amazing.
Any songs you're going to have them play? They only get an hour. They could easily do 3 or 4 hours, right? But any songs they're going to have to play for you at your fantasy festival?
Poison. I got the Poison. I got the Remedy. I'll be going off, Steve. You're going to have to stop me. Yeah, Poison. Omen. The track Omen as well. It's going to be a bit predictable, but, no good. Start the dance. Yeah, the long. But Poison is definitely the one that they will, probably play last.
Great stuff. I was lucky enough to see The Prodigy, I think twice. I saw them support Oasis at Nebworth, which was fantastic. And I saw them at their own gig at Brixton Academy. And no one ever lied, that is still the loudest gig I've ever been to in my life. Like, it shook me to my core when they came on. Like, the bass, when it hit.
Yeah.
Couldn't believe it. And the amount of drugs being smoked in that venue was like, to a 21-year-old was like unbelievable. Like, at that point. Prodigy...
Mate, I saw that... Sorry, Steve. I saw their last ever gig.
Oh, really?
Well, in the UK anyway. So Ali Pali, 2008, December 2018. Was it 2019? Anyway, yeah, it was the last gig they did at the UK. So I was glad I got to see them then anyway. But yeah, no, I agree with you, mate. 100%.
Fantastic live band making their 6th appearance on the Fantastival podcast. They've headlined a few before and they've taken a few other Midway Madness slots. So they're going to be, I guess, for the Midway Madness slot, going to play from 5 till 6. We'll take another half-hour break. and it'll be time for your pre-headline act. So we've got 3 acts down, 2 acts to go. Your pre-headline act are going to get 90 minutes to shake us. So Maz, who are you going to have as your pre-headline act?
Right, this is very relevant. Now, he is probably, and I don't like using the word favourite, it's almost like hit playground, isn't it, my favourite, but he is. But he'll play his band stuff as well. It's very relevant. So George Michael / Wham.
Do you know what?
George is, oh God.
That was, before we started recording, I said I've got one name who I think you're going to go for, and I'll tell you after.
Yeah.
That name was George Michael. I love it. Love it.
Well, he's a local boy, so we're local. My boy went to school with Maz. We're down the road from him, but that's not the reason, obviously. Do you know what? He was so real when he sang. Probably more his solo stuff. When he sang, he meant it. He was real, and it was funny because people saw him as this sort of hot boy. But for me, he was as real as Leonard, Liam, anyone you want to say. You know, Bob Dylan, the lot. He was true, but what we talked about earlier on with melody, he had it all with melodies. I mean, the songs off Faith, One More Try, what a song. Listen Without Prejudice album, Praying for Time, up there with Imagine for me. The older album, my favourite George Michael album. And don't get me wrong, Steve, I felt with George Michael, he was all thin line between doing great and then I don't think he was as great with fast songs. Sometimes there could be a couple of them a bit sort of cheesy. And I think that's why his output wasn't as much. He only did 3 solo albums. And Wham, only lasted 4 years. But what a musician. And even, the Wham stuff, everything that she does, just what a song. Really strange way of chord progression of it as well. But yeah, it's just amazing. Great voice. You know what? He didn't have the most amazing voice, but he sang well. And that's 2 different things, having a great voice or being able to sing well. He sang so well. So yeah, and I still can't believe he's not here, to be honest.
Yeah, terrible, really.
Got a bit deep there, didn't I? Sorry.
Mate, you can get as deep as you need to go on the podcast. It's all good.
So George would be, he might bring the mood down a little bit after Prodigy.
That's fine.
So he might have to play like Fast Love and Freedom and those sort of stuff a bit more. But yeah, definitely George.
He's going to have to cram those hits in because he only gets an hour and a half. And believe it or not, he makes his first appearance on the Fantastival Podcast, as do Wham. First time been chosen. And again, quite relevant, I think, because I've just had a massive box set out. And I'm sure there's a Netflix documentary about to hit on Wham. So I think Wham are coming back in a big way soon. I
watched the documentary yesterday, actually, Steve, last night. Yeah, no, it's. I grew up with Wham as well. I was from about 11 or 12 then, so there's that as well. But yeah, definitely. But yeah, I'm not surprised it's first chosen because we're talking about a festival, not as an artist. And the thing with George Michael is his songs do tend to be a bit more somber. But so that was the toss-up there between him and the Eagles. But I thought, I've got to keep George in.
Yeah, I'm sure I've heard you sing a few George. I'm sure there's some connection with you and George Michael to me, but I can't quite put my finger on it. But I thought George would be picked. He is, so I'm delighted as he makes his Fantastival debut. He gets an hour and a half and we'll play till 8 o'clock. We'll take a half-hour break and then your headliner gets 2.5 hours, gets to play from 8:30 to 11. Now, you mentioned an act who you said you might come back to, who I imagine could be your headliner, but I'm going to leave it down to you, Maz. So, 8:30, time for your headliner to take the stage. So, who is going to headline Mazfest?
So, I saw him 7 years ago, and I thought, not being ageist, obviously, I just thought maybe he's past his best, but let's see what he's like. He was amazing, absolutely amazing, and it's Mr. Stevie Wonder.
Great.
Love the man.
Shout.
Love the man. And he was so funny as well, Steve. He was doing the Cockney voices, he didn't come across with a bit like a diva. He was funny, full of personality. But again, the songs, songs in the Key of Life, Inner Vision, Fulfillness Finale, all those. It's just amazing. Again, you realise, just like Elton did at Glastonbury recently, just hit after hit, just great. I don't even want to call it hit, just great song after another. Fantastic. Yeah, definitely Stevie. Probably as well my favourite vocalist ever.
Yeah, great vocalist. So many great songs to choose from, and he gets 2.5 hours to play every one of his great songs. And you get to watch it at your fantasy festival. So Stevie Wonder, 4th time he's been chosen, taking a few headline slots as you would expect. So he plays till 11 o'clock. Then at 11 o'clock he's going to welcome back on stage George Michael and Wham, The Prodigy, Jamiroquai, Hall & Oates, so you've got an absolute wealth of talent from many musical genres on the stage at Stanley Park, and they all get to play one song. I'm going to let you come out as well, Maz, so you and your band can come out as well and do a little bit with them if you want to as well. From me to you, a gift, parting gift.
Well, I'm going to have to get into rehearsals then.
But what song would you like them to all play together?
Do you know what? It came to me like that, and it's Slide Away Oasis. Just epic. Just imagine that with the sun going down at a festival. It's my favourite Oasis song. It's my favourite song of the 90s. It's just such a beautiful song. But it captures that, that whole epicness of a festival, I think, would go down. I mean, if you thought about the actual artist doing it, it wouldn't work, right? But it's not about that for me. It's just like, it's fantasy. So, yeah, definitely that song.
Well, I reckon Hall & Oates could probably pull it off from a musical perspective. I reckon Daryl could probably pull it off. I'd quite like to see Jamiroquai have a go at some of it. I think George Michael, the chorus, could be great. I think Stevie Wonder could deliver it in a different style.
I don't know what Liam from Prodigy would be doing, though.
Probably like some little beats behind it. I think that'd be amazing. I'd love to watch that. So Slide Away is going to be your encore, which brings your Fantasy Festival to a close. So before you change your mind, let's lock this in and get this one into the Fantastival vault. So we've got Mazfest taking place at Stanley Park in Liverpool. In your opening acts, we've got Hall & Oates. Super seconds, we've got Jamiroquai. Midway Madness, we've got The Prodigy. Pre-headline act, we've got George Michael and Wham. Headlining your Fantasy Festival, we've got Stevie Wonder. Any of your acts going to play an album in full at all, or are you going to...
Yeah, Stevie Wonder doing Innovision.
Oh, lovely.
Which for me is my favourite album of his, yeah.
Great shout. And for your encore, all 5 of your acts are going to play Slide Away. Sounds like an amazing Fantasy Festival to me, man. Are you happy to lock that one into the Fantastival vaults?
100%, Steve, 100%. Get it in before I stick the Eagles in or David Brent.
So, Maz, before we wrap this one up then, so you say you're back into the music and you're going to go and record. I guess what are your plans like for the future in terms of music? Just what's on the horizon?
Do you know what? I'm never my happiest, Steve. Just going into the studio, writing a song, writing some tunes, recording it, and just getting it out there in that cycle. If we could do a live gig, I'd love that. But it's trying to force the other boys, if we can do that, see how it works. But yeah, I think it's just a case of just come up writing new songs and keep me off the streets, really. And yeah, that's what I just love doing. So I'll continue doing it until I can't do it anymore. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's give the band. Are the band on any socials yet? Are you plugging any socials yet, or is it very early days in that respect?
Yeah. So yeah, I think I've said before. So we're called Electroverb, and we're gonna. I don't think we're on SoundCloud, but mainly with like demos of older stuff. But we're going to completely launch on social media once we've mastered, because they're being mastered at the moment. Once that's done, then yeah, we're going to Spotify, Apple Music, and so on. So yeah, I'll obviously post it on Twitter and stuff like that, and Instagram. Absolutely.
So keep an eye out or an ear out for Electroverb. If anyone wants to follow you, Maz, on Twitter, you're on social, right? So if anyone is listening or hearing you first time, go, that's an amazing set list. I want to hear what he comes up with when this album's released. How do people find you on Twitter or Insta?
Yeah, so on Insta, I'm Maz40. So I set that up 12 years ago. So yeah, that one's easy one to follow. And on Twitter, it's just Maz, but it's at Giannatti37. But I suppose I could send this to you anyway, and then you can link it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, do you know what? It's about just seeing what people think of the music, and that's all that matters, really. So yeah, can't wait.
Absolutely. We'll keep a clean ear out for that one. So that is it, everyone. Thank you for listening to the 134th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this one, let us know. You can subscribe and review the podcast on iTunes if that's how you're listening. Or if you're listening on Spotify, you can rate the show by giving it 5 stars. You can also comment on the episode as well. If you've enjoyed this one, please let us know and do that. It helps massively with the algorithms behind that. We are also on Twitter, as is Maz. So if you don't follow us, make sure to do so. You can find the podcast at Fantastival P. And the podcast is also on TikTok and having a great time. Not that I'm doing any live videos on it, but doing a bit of content around the festival posters that we love to do. So if you're on TikTok or Twitter, give us a follow. If not, feel free to drop the podcast an email at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com, as we'd love to hear from you. So unfortunately on the podcast, we don't play any music, but I'll get some tracks from Maz from his chosen acts and we'll whack that onto a playlist, and that'll be found in your episode description. So if you're listening and have enjoyed the episode, scroll down, there'll be a nice little Spotify link. Hit that link and there'll be some tunes from the artists that have been spoken about on this podcast. So Maz, 134th episode done. I've had such a great time reconnecting with you. It's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. You said you were nervous before we started or earlier in the day. How have you found it? Because I felt like you've come across really well as a natural. How have you found it though, mate?
I loved it. I was privileged to be asked, to be honest with you, Steve. I just loved it. This is what we do anyway, me and my friends. We get around the table, we do like our top 10 best 90s songs, best bands. So I love talking about music. So yeah, great. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on.
Mate, been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best with Electroverb and looking forward to hearing that voice belting out over some lovely tunes. I'm sure is coming really soon. So that was it, like I said. I'll be back next week with episode number 135. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.